So what's this year been like for Korea in general? Not like I can really compare what life during a pandemic in Korea is like to other countries besides what I've seen on the news and on the internet, because I've only been here. I haven't attempted to travel and I haven't wanted to travel because the only place I would have gone is the US, and that seems to have been a particularly dangerous place to go, and it still is. The problem wouldn't be getting there so much as coming back, not to mention quarantining here for 2 weeks before going back to work. So I think this is the first year where I've just stayed put the entire year. Winters in Seoul aren't especially great to begin with, so with the risk of going out now, it's a lot worse. I mean, I guess it's comparable to other places where they tell people just to stay at home. I don't feel particularly unsafe on the subway, but I prefer not to take the subway. I figure that if, riding the subway was a vector for transmission, we'd have heard about it in the news a lot more. And Korean researchers seem to know quite a bit about where the transmissions tend to happen. Still, I only prefer to take the subway when necessary. And even though there's a relatively low amount of people who are infected compared to other countries, for example, this week, most days the average has been just a little above 1,000 for the whole country, a little under 400 for Seoul. Even if I were not to be around any other person who's infected, not that I would know, and not that they would necessarily know, the way I think about it is, imagine there are 10 people in one subway car. Imagine that they're evenly spread out along the car. Imagine one other person gets on the car. Those people might rearrange themselves to be evenly spread out for 11 people, but it still means that people will be slightly closer together than they otherwise would. Now, the subways haven't been as empty as just 11 people per car lately, but you get what I mean. The more people who go on, the more people will be closer together, even if that doesn't mean you will necessarily be close to other people. So my thinking is just me putting myself out and being around other people endangers other people, even though I'm not infected, just by them trying to avoid being close to me. They say restaurants and cafes have been a vector for infection. Right now we're at social distancing level 2.5, which means that cafes, big chain cafes like Starbucks and Coffee Bean, they can be open, but people cannot sit there. They can only take out. Independent cafes can't allow people to sit, which is kind of weird. Restaurants still operate because people need to eat, but restaurants are trying to be accommodating. Me personally, because of my exercise regimen, I try to eat a lot, and this year I've indulged in cheap Korean buffets. This is mostly because the other buffets I was eating at have closed, but these cheap Korean buffets are actually pretty good for what they are, and I'm kind of kicking myself for not having discovered them earlier. So in one I go to, it's actually a bar that has a lunch buffet. So the bars have these kind of long tables, and what they've done is put up plastic barriers in the middle of the tables, so that potentially one or two people will be cut off from one or two other people. But when I go, usually there aren't even enough people to fill up one person per table, so it's fine. They also mandate that people wear a plastic glove on one hand for the hand that they're using the tongs to pick up the food with. I go to another cheap Korean buffet which doesn't use the plastic glove, but the tables are all pretty spread out and it hasn't been that crowded. I tried going to one new buffet this year, and while the food was pretty good, they did not even mandate that people wear masks at the buffet table, so I decided I'm not going back there anytime soon. People here are generally good about wearing masks. It is mandated that people must wear masks on public transportation, subways and buses, trains, and as far as I've seen, people all wear masks on subways and buses and trains. Outside is a different story. I mean, first of all, there's always people stopping on the side to smoke, and they cannot smoke with their masks on. But then, of course, there can be people who picked up an iced coffee and are walking and drinking it, and therefore they have their mask down a bit. That's kind of inevitable, though, as long as those people are kind of trying to avoid other people. At my workplace, there is a kind of communal room where people eat lunch together, where they used to. They are no longer allowed to eat lunch together. People are instructed that if they eat lunch in the office, that they do it by themselves at their own desks. They're also instructed that if anyone goes out for lunch, as I do, not to eat with other people. Again, it's well known at this point that one of the greatest ways to infect other people is to sit across from them and talk with them and, kind of share an airway. One thing that most restaurants do, or I think they have to do, and that my gym did when it was still open, which it is currently not, is that you should sign in, either write your name and phone number or use a QR code on KakaoTalk. This would allow the government to perform contact tracing. I'm sure Americans are bristling at that idea because they're crazy paranoid, but nobody has a problem with it here because it has helped to curb the spread of infections. Also, Kakao has its own special sort of daily coronavirus update, so we can see the stats of how many new infections there are, how many are domestic, how many are imported, the number of new infections per city or region. We can see the trend over a 7-day period, and it's updated around 10 a.m. every day. A lot of door handles also have these I don't know what you call them, but they're some form of plastic, and I guess your germs don't stick to them as much. It's a simple measure, but if they say it works, that's good. As I'm making this video, it's the slight end of December. Korea and the world is in the midst of the third wave. That is expected to last until probably the end of February when things start to warm up a little bit. People have started getting the vaccines in the UK and the US, but not here. Korea is in the process of acquiring them, but allegedly it's not supposed to get a hold of them until February, so we'll see what happens. We're a bit better off compared to some other countries about containing the spread of infection, so hopefully that's the right call and everything will be fine until then.